Welcome to City Strolls podcast, LA Connections, Strategic Actions for a Just Economy, Part 2.
I think when you look at place-based work, I think the practical stuff is really important. I mean, like Gavin was talking about, like a practical strategy, like location-based, like geographically based, like really specific about like the community that people live in and the resources they use in where they call home. I think it's what we talk about when we mean place-based. And your work being focused around that means the outcomes of the work you're doing really bringing positive benefit, bringing improvement to that physical space. And also it's an awareness around how environment affects our mentality and our ability to achieve, and just like the importance of having a good environment around folks and helping to improve that environment is one way to make sure that folks can progress or have bigger political ideas or take bigger political actions. And so that's why when we talk about place-based, what we're talking about. When you talk about real practical stuff that you're in that context, real practical strategies, real practical outcomes, I mean, from a strategy around like door knocking and the real practicalness of that one-on-one contact to the work that we're doing with the land trust, where it's about building housing, and really specifically how do you build affordable housing and how do you ensure that folks have safe, stable roofs over their heads. To us, that's real practical in the sense of being really focused around bringing something that on some levels is taken for granted, but the reality is very integral to the struggle we're having in terms of land, and in terms of people being able to afford to live in this community and stay in this place, and stay in the spaces that they raise their kids in, raise their families in, been raised in themselves in, and call home. It's one of the biggest challenges for us is the fact that folks are losing their ability to stay within these places and this neighborhood. And so part of our struggle with what tends to happen with our work is that we're focused around geographic work in this neighborhood, but if the people, the demographics are changing, not in a way where folks are seeing improvement, like folks are moving because they're moving to bigger houses somewhere, or they're getting better jobs, or they're getting more resources somewhere. But the reality is a lot of folks are moving out and getting less, losing a lot of resources, losing housing, losing jobs, having to spend more for transportation, things like that, because a lot of folks will still come to this community because this is where their job is, this is where their connections are, but they can't even afford to physically live here anymore. And so it becomes a detriment. And so if folks were moving to better situations, I don't think we would have a lot of challenges we're dealing with.
So just for some perspective, because the situation in the States is so different from the UK or Glasgow. So basically there's no public housing left. So they've been tearing down. So the housing schemes over there are equivalent to sort of what we call the projects over here. They've been tearing all of those down. People to get help from the government as far as housing goes, you're on a waiting list for, I think the waiting list is now up to 8 years, 8-year waiting list to even get any kind of help at all in getting housing. There's between 70 and 90,000 homeless people in Los Angeles. 40% of those are families, women and children. And there's nowhere for those people. There's no housing. There's nowhere for those people to go. And the rents. So a lot of people in our community are earning between like $1,200 to $1,500 a month. The new apartments that they're building and the new apartments after they renovate them are kind of, the average rent is over $2,000 a month for a 2-bedroom house. So that's twice people's income, for these new apartments. And so there's a huge amount of pressure to move people out. So some people are paying, most people here pay, in our community, I would say between 50 and 70% of their income just goes to rent, nothing else. And so they have to try and figure out how to get food and transportation and clothes and all that stuff. That's all on top of that. And so usually they go without a lot of things just to be able to pay the rent. And there's a huge effort to push people out because the owners know that if they get this family out of their apartment, they can then charge twice as much to another group of people coming that are trying to move it back into the neighborhood. So it's very different, I think, just in the amount of homelessness and the amount of need and the lack of any kind of government housing at all. It's a completely different scenario, though Glasgow's heading that way, closing down the different housing projects and stuff.
So what do you do with the land reform thing?
Well, I mean, our strategy around land trust. I don't know if land trust exists. I don't know if they exist in other contexts, but here in the United States, a land trust is the idea that you have property, you have actual physical land that's held under community trust ownership. So it's not individual ownership. It's not like one person owning a pile of land, but a nonprofit holds the land, and then the nonprofit structure has to be set up in a way where community control is ensured over the land. And so there's some mechanisms for that, but that also depends on the kind of land, the kind of organization itself. And so not all land trusts necessarily are as.
But where does the land come from in the first place?
It's bought off. It's purchased off of the perspective of the market. So we actually have funding that we've lined up to be able to purchase property and pull it off the market. Or there's sometimes means through like in Boston and on the East Coast, they've used eminent domain. So the city and the federal government will help to take land off the market for them and allow them their use of eminent domain, because the land that they were dealing with was blighted land, and it was land that wasn't being used or was actually detrimental. And so they were able to set up the political relationships to be able to use eminent domain there. That's much harder for us here in Los Angeles, where it's not really eminent domain friendly in these areas. Typically, that process is used. The only place that people that really use that here is the school district, in terms of taking land and using that for building new schools and stuff. It's very hard for it to be able to use for anything else. So we have to raise money to be able to buy land off the market, which is very difficult also considering the way land prices are right now. It still takes us some political work to be able to get deals to happen, to be able to build housing. And we're very young. We haven't actually built our first building yet. We've only been around for about a year and a half, 2 years. We've secured and done a lot of work to secure the funding necessary to operate. And so now we have organization. We have a strong membership base. And right now we're actually looking for properties to acquire. So we work with community residents to identify properties and land that's not being used or is being underutilized or is a detriment to the communities. And then we'll work to we're working right now to secure deals to buy those properties, or working with political processes to help us acquire those properties through the city helping, stepping in the CRA, the Community Redevelopment Agency, helping to help us get properties and those kind of relationships. I'm not sure if that's clear, but.
No, there's a lot in Scotland. There's people buying, people in the Highlands, they're buying islands. There's a lot of good stuff happening where people are buying the land back and taking them off the German prospectors and stuff like that. But it's the urban thing again. It's like how because a lot of the common good things quite strong, out of town. But it's when you come to the urban, that's when it's more difficult, obviously.
Yeah, it's much more difficult in the urban setting, with land being scarce in urban areas and stuff. So it's something that, it's a growing strategy. There's more of them coming into existence, land trust. And they're very old in the United States. Like they actually came out of sharecropping and stuff in that period in the South, where folks' land would come under community ownership for the purposes of developing farmland. And so it's something that's been pulled through the years and stuff, and now we're trying to apply it in different settings. And some places it's working more effectively than others, and we're just getting off the ground here, so we're still trying to see how effective it will be.
When you think about it, the rentier society, it's only been around for a few hundred years.
Yeah.
When the first guy put the stakes in and says, "This is mine."
It's true. This is America. It's only been around.
You know what I mean? Well, even in Scotland, it was only around the towns where you get land that was under charter. But the whole country was for people feeding their sheep. That was in Europe, in America. The younger country. People forget that it's not been around for a long time. The rentier society totally persecuted people. Rent is the name of the game nowadays. Yeah. You can even do without food. People feed you, but a roof under your head is like the terror everyone lives under.
Yeah. No, that's true. That is true. And I think Andrea said it, which I think we consider as a norm now, is homelessness. Yeah. But the reality is, it's like homelessness doesn't exist in every country. But here it's like the norm. Oh, you're homeless and it's your fault, right? That's basically what folks think. That's the common thing or the common perception. But it's true. We are young, and just to even see where we're at now with this whole, with where our economy has gone due to the housing crisis and all of the all of this whole rigging of books just to make a profit off of land.
We did this whole work to really show people
Yeah.
the housing crisis. So to
The
really
need compared to the crisis. So
right,
like
and then
what was
trying to
there.
get people to think outside of, all right, so this is the money that we can get to build affordable housing, and it's never ever going to be enough. So what then do we do? So looking at alternative ways of getting, looking at alternative ways of getting control over property, but just having, we do a lot of stuff just really breaking down the economy and how it works and why it works the way it does on top and who's on bottom and why that is. Like we do workshops regularly, and we have a lot of different little committees and not organizations, but
They're like neighborhood committees
yeah.
in certain sectors of the neighborhoods that are basically committees that have formed due to struggles of certain building campaigns, or they just came and got connected with Sage through maybe a jobs piece. So we built these neighborhood committees, and there's about 3 of them in this area, where we try to meet monthly to talk about strategies, updates of the community. And there's a work plan basically that they're working on, which is really outreaching and doing kind of outreaching to the local community members and really trying to figure out what are the issues, trying to solve some of that, and bringing folks and ideal leaders who would be interested to be a part of this movement. So that's really kind of some of the tactics we're using, which Andrea was talking about, this neighborhood committee type style, which is a model of just building folks rather than building tenant unions in a building.
Yeah.
We're saying, well, not everyone likes to build a tenant union or is on board to build a tenant union in their building. So we're now looking at models such as our other sister organizations that we work with that look at, well, if you have one person in this building, one person in there, well, why can't you just start a block club? Why can't you just start a neighborhood committee? And then maybe expand that to be a little bigger so that it isn't just 5 people at every meeting, but that you have a big, large sum of folks, so that motivates people too, that there's something, that there's actually some interest.
If you've given enough alternatives about how you can get involved.
Kind of looking on the flip side too, I think we're at a moment right now where I think organizations are now shifting to this very model. It's no longer this old NGO model of service-oriented work, or this old NGO model of policy change from the top up, but really looking at the bread and butter issues of folks and trying to figure out strategies around that. And I think probably something that's always happened in Glasgow, but I think here it's happened in certain historical moments. But I think within the NGO parameters, it's always been very staff and intellectual driven. That I think that you're seeing a lot of that change now, which I think it's hope. And now with the crisis we're in, or the moment we're in, hopefully we can galvanize some of that energy and really build some sort of, at least, if it isn't a movement now, it's at least seeds towards that, right? Especially at the time right now where everyone's just really upset with Wall Street. The very people who've just really screwed with the entire world, right? With neoliberalism. There's a moment right now where folks are extremely upset. People are losing their retirements, people are at a mass rate, people are losing their homes, people are losing jobs, and so I'm hoping that there's something out of that we could figure out to really kind of push something other than some of the siphoned work we do, which is very local. And how do we turn that more national? How do we turn it international? Right?
And just a very basic questioning of, so like private property in the U.S. is sort of this sacred thing. And so a lot of what we do kind of very fundamentally questions that. And so I think just trying to push that idea that, so like, what does it mean to own? It's like half of LA is absentee owned, and like, is that right? And what does that mean? And how does that impact the community? And if there's a way to change that. So it's this idea of who should own the land. Is it the guy that lives in Malibu and is collecting, huge rents every month and letting it fall apart, or is it the people that actually live there and are trying to keep it up and are trying to participate in their community? So there's a lot of, and I think there's a lot of really cool, like I know there's one of our sister organizations in Boston's doing all this, like they do blockades. So there's this huge foreclosure crisis. Everyone's getting foreclosed on. So they're out there really trying to put forward this alternative vision of what what
organizing
human
looks like.
rights are, and yeah,
And tactics of organizing.
and tactics of organizing.
And going after the very banks, and the international banks
Yeah.
and national banks that are U.S. ran, right, by our corporations, putting them accountable, because no one's done that, right? Where our government's talking about $700 billion bailout to all these people, all tax money that we'll be paying forever. And these folks are saying, people are losing their homes while we're bailing out these people, and that's just not just. What does that look like? And so they're, like what Andrea said, is they're doing eviction blockades to show, there's resistance for this. Unfortunately, it isn't at a mass scale like I think we should be starting
And
to
it
look at.
might be reaching that soon.
I
But some of the
agree.
other stuff that we're doing is looking at this idea of what. So we've done a lot of slum housing stuff and working with the city to prosecute slumlords and trying to get the city to look at ways of. So if they catch someone dealing drugs out of their house, they take the house, because it's a criminal felony, whatever. But whereas if they convict somebody of poisoning children because they don't keep up the apartments, they don't automatically take away the house. And so why wouldn't they just take it away and give it to somebody that will actually fix it and maintain it? And so we're trying to shift that sort of idea of
It's a property rights idea.
it's
too.
a property rights. And there's a huge thing in LA where tenants aren't counted as residents. So I don't know if this is true in Glasgow, but so when big developments happen, tenants never get notified that the lot next to them is going to turn into this 15-story hotel. I mean, they never know. They're not told about any of the meetings. It's the owner of their building that gets the notification because the city considers the owner as having a vested interest in the community, whereas tenants, they don't consider that they do. And so half the struggle for years has been just putting an alternative, like who is the community and who has
It's
control
changing
over
the
it.
thing. The national interest is always business interest, and that's how they protect the thing the whole time. You have to protect the national interest. And what I mean is the business community.
Yeah.
The real national interest is the people who are going to get ill in these places, the people that are going to commit
That's
crimes,
true.
the people that's going to do this. That's the national interest. That's the thing.
That's a good way of
If you
framing
look
it.
after that, well, the rest will look after itself. Business doesn't need any.
Yeah.
But it's just that whole idea about how
That's
the
true.
business in the frame as being our national interest, i.e. if business suffers, we all suffer.
Right.
It's the complete opposite way.
Exactly. And actually, that's a good way of framing it. I've never really heard about it. Because usually when we think national interest, when we're talking about it here in the States, it's usually national security. It has to do with resources that the government's looking for, but we never domesticate it like that.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean, national interest? It actually means that. Being able
It
to
means
say, I'm going to
saying-
take care of this piece of land that's part of this country. It's a national interest to do that, right? That's actually a good phrase.
Well, we
Because
did. I mean, the other thing, so we did this report, Shame of the City, on slum housing, and so that's kind of an effort as well, just to get the city to charge owners what they're actually costing the community. So I mean, we've looked at sort of so many kids in this community have asthma because they live in these rat and roach infested buildings that are full of leaks and mold, and that costs millions of dollars to the public hospital. You know what I mean? Like huge amounts of money. Lead poisoning costs a huge amount of money, and kids have permanent brain damage from getting lead poisoned, and so this is all damage that's being caused to families just by one greedy owner not fixing their building, and so they're not only causing permanent damage to the family itself and changing their lives forever. If you have a kid with blood poisoning, you're never going to be the same again, and the kid's never going to be what they could have been if they hadn't been poisoned. But apart from that cost, which can't be calculated in any way, but there's also a hard medical cost to it that we're all paying, and so I mean, we're definitely we're taking different cuts at ways of exposing this sort of thing and really trying to get people to understand not only what they should be doing, but what they shouldn't be doing and what they should be paying for with prison and with money. We definitely start where people are, and
Yeah.
figure out what the real, we don't.
Yeah.
We start with where people are and with what their problems are, and then figure out together, what
Yeah, it's-
how to fix it. And I think what we bring is sort of a context
Yeah, and that's always.
and a way of questioning things and kind of coming to the deeper truths of why things are the way they are, and so you can come up with a larger strategy out of that. But yeah, it's very practically speaking. So the tenant work, we go into a building, bring people together to talk about the issues in the building, figure out how to solve it, figure out who's responsible for it, and then people decide their strategy from there.
And direct them towards
Right.
other people doing the same thing.
Yeah, exactly, and bring them together with other communities. Because it's happening all over town, and there's
It's
all these
everywhere.
there's amazing work going on all over.
And it's all around the nation right now, and everything.
Yeah.
It's just happening everywhere.
And the best work that's going on is being done that way. It's very much based in people's realities and being driven by people themselves as they choose what they're doing.
Exactly. And I think that's where a lot of organizations are headed towards that too. It's like how do we use alternative forms of media too? Right? And it's because no one else is going to report it. CNN ain't going to put it on. The AP ain't going to be coming and visiting. So yeah, those I think are tactics and strategies that folks are looking around and trying to figure out. And I guess and I'm glad, and that's why I'm hopeful that where we're at now, there's a lot more organizations leaning towards the direction Andrea's talking about, like what I was talking about earlier. It's more of a community-based approach. How do you build strategy and solutions and mobilization with the community kind of based approach going hand in hand? And that's harder than it's harder to get done than the way we say it.
Okay. Thank
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Trees.